Good evening, everyone. Welcome to week 19 of our COVID-19 Town Hall with Dr. Sanjay Doshi. My name is John Daw. We're broadcasting live from Northeastern Pennsylvania. Hi, everyone. Let's just get right into it. We've got some special guests coming up in a little bit on tonight's show. But before they show up, let's get an update from everyone. How's everyone doing this week?
Hey, John. I'm doing well. It's good to see everyone. Thank you again for arranging today's event, our town hall number 19. Thank you for inviting these teachers to join us and continue the conversation around the reopening of schools and the safety precautions required for this era where we have a pandemic, and many of our communities are still struggling with high positivity rates. So it will be great to get their perspective because they will now take over from healthcare professionals as being frontline somewhat in terms of caring for the most precious part of our society, our children, and making sure that they are safe and they have an environment that they can learn in. And there are lots of challenges to that. So John has worked hard on providing some background information, and also these teachers that will be joining us will be providing their unique perspective, and hopefully the conversation will bring to light some of the things that are really big challenges for them, as well as some of the things that they are thinking about, and perhaps even their districts are already thinking about implementing to ensure the safety of children and their learning environment and their teachers, and also adjunct to that, the safety of their homes as they transit back and forth to school. So we will get into that in a few minutes, but before we do, we're checking in again with our co-hosts Karen in Wisconsin and Terry in Texas. Thank you guys for joining us. So the usual instructions before we begin. We are in webinar format on Zoom, so that means that questions can be asked at any time using the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen, the Q&A icon. If we are in the midst of discussion of any topic and you have a question, please go ahead and interject. Karen will be monitoring the Q&A panel as usual. Terry will be assisting and also monitoring the Facebook Live comments and questions that come across. So as and when they do arrive in the queue, that usually is a minute delay. So if we've moved on, at least Karen and Terry will drop anchor on the proceedings, and so that we can address questions. So always feel free to stop us and interject your questions. At the end of the 2 hours or so that we usually hold the town hall, we then switch over to a general format where everyone can participate, and we just have a conversation. So with that being said, what has happened since last week? A number of very interesting developments. Obviously, vaccines have moved forward from their previous phases, which were early phases, to actually now being trialed in human beings, also known as a phase 3 clinical trial. The Oxford AstraZeneca trial has, I'm joined by my friends of the furry variety as well, so I excuse their barking. So Oxford AstraZeneca has moved forward with large-scale deployment. Up to 30,000 people are now enrolled and will be receiving the vaccine in the UK. Here in the United States, the Moderna vaccine is the first to be deployed into phase 3 clinical trials here in the United States. Last week, we talked about the different types of vaccines and their potential efficacy, as well as the complexity of developing them. So if you guys have any questions regarding vaccines, go ahead and add those to the Q&A panel, or ask freely on Facebook Live. We are going to see the results of these clinical trials as they roll out, and the various approaches go from phase 2 to phase 3 in the next 4 to 6 months. So there's a lot of hope on the vaccine front. There's a lot of development positively in terms of the data being generated. It looks like this first round of vaccines ultimately will prove to be safe. Now we have to see if they are truly effective. All the caveats that we've been discussing for the last 5 weeks around vaccines still hold true, in that this first generation of vaccine will address only this first set of strains. It may not be fully effective in terms of full protection. So we estimate that the best of them will provide about, in the best of all cases, about 30 to 40% protection. That means if 10 people get vaccinated with the same vaccine, and they're all exposed to the same amount of inoculum of virus, that 3 to 4 people will be fully protected, and the other 6 or 7 will be variably protected. So, these are all things that the general public may or may not fully be aware of as they get vaccinated, but it is very important that vaccines, as they roll out in this first generation, be adopted. I know there's a lot of trepidation around vaccination, driven in the past decade by a movement that has questioned their safety, and indeed implicated them in all kinds of diseases that they potentially feel are sequelae to vaccination, including autism spectrum, as well as other neurodegenerative diseases, that they feel are or may be caused by vaccines. Now, I will not start a vaccine page. I will not start gathering data and filing it on a resource page like we've done with COVID. I will say that as with all things that are developed by medical science, we strive to be 99.999% safe, and we know that we are not always effective when we apply allopathic medication. We try to be an exact science. We strive to be, for the last 100 years, improving and constantly engaged in a learning process. And unfortunately, sometimes the scientific, well, not just sometimes, often, and one of the largest causes of inadvertent death is medical error in the United States. So I'm trying to be as truthful as possible with you in that all things taken as either medication or vaccination come with inherent danger. I'm sure you've been to the hospital for perhaps a procedure. It could be something very, very simple, but you will get a long list of potential side effects or complications that come as a result of undergoing that procedure. And these are caveats that you should be aware of. They occur rarely. We try to minimize these through best practices and evidence-based procedure. So, what I'm trying to get at here is the first generation of vaccine will be, in the best cases, effective. John's waving at me, so we do have a panelist joining us, so that's great. I'm glad to see. Is it Karen or Beth? Is it Kay? Oh, we have Beth.
Hi.
It's Beth. Hey, great. Hi. Great to see you, Beth Ann. So I was just waxing on about the news on vaccines and the news in general since last week's town hall. And I was just trying to cover the fact that we're betting a lot since our containment of the pandemic in the United States has not been very, successful. Compared to other industrialized nations, we're now betting a lot on vaccination, and the speed to effective vaccine is going to be variable. So, for your sake as teachers, that before kids are allowed into school, they have to provide their vaccination record. And with the largest threat now to this school year being a disease for which we have no vaccine, I'm taking this moment to try and convince people to understand, convince people that there are inherent risks with vaccination, but overall, the vaccinations that we do provide through pediatric vaccination schedule in this country and throughout the world are largely effective and very safe. So I will leave it there, and I will allow John to kind of take over and provide introductions, and you can do your own introductions as well. But thank you guys for joining us.
Sure. We'll start with Beth. I've known Beth, I don't know how long, but Beth used to work in Wilkes-Barre and is a member of the Wilkes-Barre Area School District Board of Education. She has a bachelor's, a master's, and an education specialist certificate in school psychology from Marywood University in Dunmore, Pennsylvania, which is about 30-40 minutes north of where Sanjay and I are. So welcome, Beth Ann Owens-Harris. And we are also joined tonight by my good friend Karen Padden. Karen is an English teacher at the Scranton Area School District at the high school. So welcome to both of you. Thanks so much for joining us. We spent the last couple weeks talking about coming back to school, and it always comes down to the question, well, what are our education professionals, teachers, our administration, our educational support staff, what's going to happen when we open our school doors in a couple now weeks? So we thought, I thought, who do I know that can talk on this firsthand? And so I'm so grateful to both of you for joining us tonight. And I'll let you open up with anything you want. I see Karen is already unmuted, so we'll start with Karen and then jump to Beth.
My first remark is, how is the quality? Because the quality that I'm getting from John is not good. So I may have to log off and log back on. Is that possible before I even start?
Oh yeah, sure, Karen. Absolutely, you can do that.
Okay.
Yeah, we do have a slow connection on John's end. He's trying to accommodate for that. But yeah, even you were cutting a little bit choppy there. So if you want
5 minutes, I'll be right back on.
Okay, great.
Okay. Well,
so maybe let's switch to Beth.
So hi, thank you for having me. I'm in a unique position, I think, as a school administrator, and I can start a little bit with my background. I started in education as a school psychologist, and I worked as a school psychologist for about a decade. And I've been in several different districts now, and in my current role at the Crestwood School District, where I began in January. So I was actually there only a short 2.5 months prior to the schools closing down. So it's definitely baptism by fire there, learning an organization, and then now trying to plan for reopening of an organization in the current capacity that I'm in. So as an administrator at Crestwood, I'm in charge of behavioral health and special programs, which covers special education, children covered with 504s under the Americans with Disabilities Act, gifted education. And there's definitely, you know, when the schools first closed down in March, a lot of questions surrounded why we were going forward with just enrichment and review opportunities for students and not moving forward with curriculum. We were really building the plane as we were flying it, so to speak, because we were not prepared to switch seamlessly into a virtual learning environment. And then issues with equity were really at the forefront of our minds, because virtual learning is definitely not the, you know, it's not the answer for all students, especially students with special needs who are protected under, you know, several federal and state laws. So we've spent a lot of time over using this time during closure to really figure out, you know, how we're going to make it different, address issues with equity for students, preparing for multiple different options. So right now, as an administrative team member, we are preparing for reopening under hybrid models, virtual models, and full CDC and state guideline models if having children return to brick and mortar. So we're really having to plan for all different scenarios, and the best scenarios in my mind, and the ones that we're working really hard to address, are ones that really can move seamlessly throughout those models depending on the changing scene, because we know that things are changing very quickly. And at any time we can make all of these plans, and that, you know, a governor's order can come down and change that for us. So really planning for the unknown, planning for your children that have social, emotional, and mental health needs, planning for your staff with their mental health needs as well, making sure that you're addressing those, because the burnout, I think, during this time can be something very challenging. Meeting CDC guidelines. There's so many different factors, but I really think with a strong administrative team, working closely with partners in the community on your teams, that there are ways to creatively address these kind of issues, and that in the end, we're going to come out on the other side of this stronger as educational organizations than ever.
Okay, thank you for that background. So, have you been meeting regularly recently about strategy with reopening, and specifically strategy with the three scenarios that you described: a you know, full start, a hybrid, and then obviously if things require a virtual? What does that look like, and what are the potential triggers? So, for example, do you intend to start with a full schedule on day one this year with all your students? That's question number one. What would trigger a move to hybrid? And then what would trigger a move to virtual?
Interestingly, because I am actually affiliated with two different districts. I'm an administrator at Crestwood, and I'm also a school board director for Wilkes-Barre. So with not a lot of guidance coming down from the state, they've really left that up to local decisions. So even in these two very different scenarios, I have two different plans depending on the district. So if I could speak to Crestwood, where I'm an administrator, I'm very more closely involved on those planning committees. So we have two different planning committees. The one is a pandemic reopening health and safety planning committee. So that is actually a huge group of us that is broken down into subcommittees. And the Pennsylvania Department of Education has really laid out a blueprint of questions that need to be answered, of how you're going to follow specific guidelines and what that looks like depending on the color-coded phase. So what does that look like in yellow? What does that look like in red? And what does that look like in green? And really we're focusing on yellow and red, because there's not a lot of difference right now, I think, between yellow and green. So those subcommittees are broken up, and we meet very regularly, and they have not just only members of the school staff, but we have members of the community, as well as members of the medical community, which have been very helpful. So we're working with two different pediatricians who on those plans. Our nurses are very closely involved, and we are basically, you know, working in subcommittees and then rejoining as a larger committee to kind of go over where we are in addressing all of the different points of concern. Some of that that you had shared with me, the meme, I think, or the information, I think it was Twitter, of the teacher who had shared some concerns. She really was kind of outlining what our health and safety plan is being designed to address. So busing, transportation, social distancing in schools. Sorry, I don't know. I think it maybe got lost in my own thoughts there, but
no, it's fine. No, I'm glad you're giving us that information. I think there's a lot for us to sort through.
There's a lot.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just looking at I would like Karen to come in now and give us her background from her perspective up in Scranton. Before I ask her pretty much to introduce herself and give us the background, I just want to kind of summarize or synthesize what you were just talking about. There's, Beth Ann, I wanted to summarize what you were saying. The list of concerns is actually very, very complex and large. Before we started, I was just talking with John about the assumption that because of the testing scenario here in the United States, we're starting with the assumption that the children coming into your school environment are potential carriers, or you know, they're asymptomatic carriers, and or teachers are asymptomatic carriers. You're not starting out with an environment and where everyone has been tested negative, and therefore you're starting with an empty bubble. Sorry, an empty bubble, or a bubble where there is no COVID. Okay. You're starting with the bubble that is porous to COVID. And so the concerns, or the list of concerns, they start with where you started, which is equity. Okay. You know, access to teaching materials, learning through the equipment that they require. So your broadband, a laptop, you know, and then at home security and privacy. 1 second.
This is where I show up and do the dog barking dance.
Sorry about that.
Okay.
John, you done dancing? Okay, so yeah, so all of those issues are coming into play. Those are the basic, you know, what happens if we can't have the kids in the classroom. Then restructuring of adjunct curriculum. What do we do with art, drawing, lab science, performing arts, physical education? What about those students in career and trade schools? What about, you know, that have to be 3 feet from each other throughout the day, right? Working on projects together. Students with intellectual and development disabilities, all programs on the IEP continuum, socialization considerations. Are you going to, you know, be asking your kids not to be kids and talk to each other and enjoy, you know, the social aspects of being kids in school? So, you know, to those that are insisting that schools open, I think all of these issues need to be brought out. And I'm hoping these town halls help to educate parents and other teachers. So Karen, with that, there you go. If you could just give us your background and perspective. Mute. There we go. You're good. Good. Go ahead.
I've been working with Scranton School District. I got hired in 1999 and I started in January of 2000. Over the last 10 years, I've also been working part-time with 2 online companies, Blended Schools and GPA. So I've been doing, you know, moonlighting with them too. So I have my brick and mortar classroom at Scranton High School. And then I also do I dabble in some online courses as well. Scranton is big. And I can speak pretty confidently about my building itself. We have about 1,800 children in my building alone, and about 150 teachers, plus another 50 staff. So when this started in January, February, news travels very fast, and the kids got scared very, very fast. And not just the kids, but the teachers got scared. So when we shut down in March, a lot of people weren't prepared. They weren't prepared at home. They weren't prepared in the classroom. So what we learned over the last 3 months being March,
Right.
April, May, a little bit of June, 4 months, is that with a lick and a prayer, we could kind of do anything. We could cobble together anything to get the job done. So the thing that I can tell you the most of what we need is a lot of patience. We need a lot of flexibility and a lot of willing to learn before you just dig in your heels and are like, no, I'm not going to do that. Here's why. A lot of us have been taking classes online over the summer, taking Google classes, taking classes on how to enhance the LMS, taking classes on how to connect further with students online. What I cannot speak to is the plan that my district has, because they're unveiling it next week.
Okay.
I can't tell you what we're going to do because they'll let us know. But when they let us know, that's when full-fledged planning / panic is going to set in. Because right now I could go to the store and I could buy all the pens and pencils I want. I don't know if I'm going to be giving them out. I don't know if I'm going to need, I'm pretty sure I know I'm going to need a mask. But will I need the face shield? Will I need gloves? Will I be cleaning my classroom myself in the 4 minutes that I have between classes? How long of a day am I going to have? So there's a lot of questions, but we're ready to jump in and do what's best for the kids. Because honestly, at the end of the day, that's who it's all about, is giving them what they need. If it means keeping them safe, I'm all for staying home. And I know that online classes get a bad rap, but when you don't plan, nothing's going to work. But if you give us time to plan, we can make this work. It's just a matter of, do we have time? So if we go digital, great. If we go back to class, great. Just tell me what I got to do and I'm willing to do it. And I'm pretty sure that I'm speaking for the majority of my peers in my building. Just tell us what to do, we'll do it.
And I can say she's absolutely right. I can speak a little bit to Crestwood's plan because Crestwood has come out with their plan. So if you want to kind of get a sneak peek into what it actually looks like, an idea. Crestwood came out and said that they are coming back 5 days a week for their students as an option, or cyber school, and I'm putting quotes around cyber school as an option, our own Crestwood run cyber school. And the reason that we did that was we had actually partnered with a cyber company called Edmentum, and we were doing that prior to actually the shutdowns. We had noticed or realized there was a need for us to revamp our current cyber program, our current cyber offering for children and families who had chosen that. And we're partnering with a company that we had a lot of faith in. The superintendent and I have worked with them previously. So what they have allowed for us to do in this situation is to actually have access to their platform, which has access to curriculum, but is also fully customizable. So what we are doing is, and the reason we came out with this, so and people will say you're promoting your cyber program, and there's a lot of criticism on that. But what it is we're building, we have our teachers already, they've gone through 4 days of full training on the virtual platform. They are building the curriculum onto the cyber platform over the summer. So the curriculum is going to mirror in brick and mortar what it would mirror in the cyber platform, and teachers are going to be doing the same thing, whether it be in front of students or virtually. And that transition is going to be seamless. So there's no unenrolling, there's no redoing enrolling. Students have access to devices already because we had already issued devices to those students in need in March during the closure. And so we felt it was important to come forward with a plan for that purpose that Karen just stated, because there's so much time that needs to be done in the training portion of it. It's good to say, oh yes, this is our plan, but if we don't have the buy-in and the teachers don't feel prepared to initiate the plan, it's difficult to get something running. So we have a lot of people working over this summer to try and be ready as much as possible for what is coming in September.
Beth, you had said something about you provided technology to students. Have you seen any challenges due to lack of broadband access, lack of connectivity? Crestwood's also a really big school district, but also a pretty rural school district.
Yeah, so that's been our number one. In other districts that I've worked in who are socioeconomically more disadvantaged, the access to the devices was the number one concern. I know Hazleton is struggling very greatly with that issue. However, our biggest issue is actually access to internet, because we have some students that live in areas where they're just not able to access internet. So we have toyed around with ideas, We've toyed around with ideas of buses with, hotspots on them to go to certain areas. We have learned now about certain devices that have the internet built in, but our students in those rural areas and access to internet is definitely one of our biggest hurdles at this point as far as technology goes.
Sure.
Is Sanjay talking? I don't hear him.
Sorry, guys. I'm glad I'm glad Beth chimed in there right after Karen, because I had a moment that I needed to get a lump out of my throat, because I want to thank teachers. Teachers shaped me, and at every level, from grade school through high school, through college, through medical school. And the importance of teachers in the children's lives cannot ever be underestimated. And I know we have a unfortunate atmosphere in this country that is very adversarial and is not ready to agree on anything. But we have to be able to agree on a few things that where our humanity shines through, and everything else is put aside. You guys are heroes, and I said that to John and Terry before we started. The healthcare community is kind of handing you the baton now, because we in the healthcare community take care of the sick, and the sick are precious to us because they're our friends, our family, and they're hurting. And now we're handing something else precious to you, our children. Our society is handing our children to you to look after. And so whatever John and I and Terry and Karen and other activists, educators in our own right can do to assist you, we stand with you. So that being said, there's one of the things is obviously, the accoutrement of teaching, whether it be a laptop or internet access or pencils or whatever. Do we have adequate of that? And in the event that kids do avail of in-person teaching, what other accoutrement do we need? What other equipment do you think we will need on top of the regular stuff that you guys use on a day-to-day basis to teach? The biomedical community is trying to figure out, and John put a picture of something that was kind of troubling to me to see, is these plexiglass cubicles around the children's desks, on our start screen today. Are we going to need that? I want a discussion about whether you guys are hearing anything from your school districts about what they're investing in for that additional level of protection that may be required in this era. Protection for you, protection for the kids, the distancing requirements and other things that are coming out of, or the distancing recommendations, I should say, that are coming out of American Academy of Pediatrics or CDC, or within your own planning groups and strategy groups. Do you know, or do you have a picture of what your classroom is going to look like?
I do. So our health and safety plan, and that was, I think, where I got off on a tangent. I'm sorry if I'm talking too much. I have a tendency to do that. So I have so much information. I feel like I really give a credit to the teams we've been working with, and I appreciate your kind words because we really have been working more hours probably than ever because we care so much about the kids. And so we, as far as PPE equipment for the teachers, I know the Luzerne Intermediate Unit and the superintendents, they kind of partnered together. So the county superintendents in Luzerne have gone in and purchased together large quantities of masks, Titan sprayers, like sanitizing equipment, gloves, and Crestwood additionally is purchasing or is planning on purchasing, it hasn't been voted on yet by the school board, shields in addition. So when we can be more socially distanced in our classroom settings, the children with like Crestwood Comet logo on their shields will be able to have that. So our children with speech and language needs or social emotional, it's just, having, kids that are learning to read, being able to see the mouth and the facial expressions of the people you're working with. So I know that there has been some concern with like shields along with masks because the shields may not provide as much. So I think that we were looking at that for more instances where we have the ability to distance ourselves a little bit further. Masks will be required on all transportation. All buses are going to be sanitized by the companies between runs, and we are contact tracing, so everyone is going to have assigned seats on busing with family members if possible. When at all times possible, they will be seated with their families. Transportation is definitely a difficult issue. So we have surveys out to our families right now in applications to see how many families, if they have the ability to choose to drive their children to school, so we can free up some spacing on our buses. And the same thing with our option to go virtual or be in brick and mortar. A lot of families, for their own reasons, whether they're caring for medically fragile children or adults, seniors, whatever their personal belief is, if they're choosing virtual, our enrollment in a virtual setting is such that we're hoping, it's a numbers game at this point, that enough people are choosing the virtual format that'll also provide distance in our classrooms. Our kindergarten numbers are extremely low this year, so we'll be able to free up some teachers there. And we're not going to be using our large spaces in anywhere where we have equipment that we're sharing, so computers, STEM classes, wood shops. We're creating teams in our buildings to repurpose our teachers, to spread out our classrooms, to lower our class sizes, and to use the space in our buildings, such as the cafeteria, the gymnasium, computer labs, things that we would typically be using in situations where we didn't have the distance to spread out, and then repurposing those teachers like art and gym to allow us to reduce our class sizes. So it's really getting creative with certifications of teachers, and class rostering.
So I've got a dozen questions as a result. But before I ask the questions, I want Karen to provide her, what's going on along similar terms as what you just described with what she's seeing in Scranton. Also, as well, before I forget the questions in my head, do you have a consultant that's assisting you, or do you have an internal leader that has been selected to do the implementation?
We have a team of faculty, administrators, and school board members who have been getting together to create the plan that is going to be voted on by the board next week. And so I'm not on that team, so I don't know what they're going to plan, but what I can tell you is on an average day in my high school, we don't have buses at the high school. All of our high school children drive themselves, take the local Colts bus, so they take public transportation, or they walk in order to get to my school. So that's 1,800 kids getting to school either on their feet or on a local bus. When they get into the building, our lockers are maybe about 2 inches apart. You could fit about 4 people in a hallway. So you've got, again, 1,800 people who are moving through the hallways at the same time. They have 4 minutes to get back and forth between classes. So they go to homeroom, 4 minutes. In that 4 minutes, I have 30 kids coming into my classroom. I have to monitor the children outside the classroom, monitor the children inside of the classroom. To add to that, I have to make sure they're wearing masks. Now this is what's going on in my head right now.
Yeah.
What is my day going to look like? I have 4 minutes to sanitize all the desks, make sure my mask is okay, make sure my face mask is okay, make sure the kids have their masks, make sure we share books so they don't have their own book. Make sure that the book that they have to use is sanitized. Make sure that they have pencils. I buy them pencils. I buy them paper. Make sure that what they're doing can stay in their hand and not be handed back to me, because I don't want a pencil that they've been chewing on to come back to me. Yeah. So I'm going to do this all day. I have 10 periods. I have a prep period where I watch children in the hallway. I have a period where I could plan, and I have lunch, and from what I understand, we don't have a lunchroom because that's off limits. So I'm trying to think, how am I going to teach what I want to teach? How am I going to reach the kids? How am I going to feed them? How am I going to nurture them? How am I going to find out what they need and give them what they need? It's a lot to think about. And how am I going to be there to assist my friend who needs technical support, or my other friend who's immunocompromised, or the kid who comes down with it? Because I had children who they texted me in the spring, Mrs. Padden, I have the flu, I have the COVID. I'm like, okay, you passed, you don't have to do any more work, you're good, just text me once a week to keep touch with me. And thank God that she's okay. But I think I worry about all of them. I think about all of them. So am I doing everything that I'm supposed to be doing to cover my curriculum and to keep them safe? What our plan is, I hope that it addresses the reality of what a day in my shoes looks like. Not even thinking about substitute teachers, because if I get sick and I have to get quarantined for 2 weeks, I don't know where they're going to find a substitute teacher who can teach what I teach in 2 weeks, because not every school district has a sub pool of licensed teachers. A lot of districts, what they do is they service out to different employment agencies. So as long as you have a college degree and you can pass a criminal background check, you could be a substitute teacher. So these are the people who are coming in to sub for us, and we don't even know if they're asymptomatic carriers. So even though all I want is to get back in front of my kids, I want to see them. I want to connect with them. I don't know how we're going to do it safely. So there's a lot of what ifs right now that I wish I could answer. I wish I could tell you what my district is going to do. I'm sure that they're keeping us and the students in mind first and foremost, but I don't know what is going to happen for another week. I just know that I have a lot of questions and no answers right now. So it's very hard to plan. I mean, I can sit down and make a Bitmoji classroom. I could do that now. I can bump up my own training now. I could read books now. I can get prepared to change my assessments from pen and paper assessments to Google Documents or to project-based assessments. I'm doing that. Like, I'm doing everything I can now to get prepared for what is in my control. It's what's out of my control that's causing all the anxiety.
So I'm going to have to suppress my, well, I'm trying my best to suppress my, you know, the guy who gives advice and just listen. But I'm going to have to put that aside for a moment and say that if you don't have a health and safety point person on this specific issue of, you know, what is your classroom going to look like? What is the transit of students between classrooms? Where are they going to eat? That one person is not the principal. It's not the super. It's not well, it may be a teacher, but that teacher is going to have to stop teaching because it is a full-time 100% dedicated position. If your school doesn't select a health and safety officer and you decide to do this by committee, I promise you, you will not be as effective. And that health and safety officer is probably going to have to do what John and I and others do. They're going to have to read everything they can get their hands on. They're going to have to talk to other school districts and find out what they're doing and what their best practices are. They're going to have to constantly be involved in a learning process that renews, you know, the best practices for the school on a week-to-week and month-to-month basis. And they have to be involved in teaching the teachers. So that's the piece of advice that I've gotten from my international friends who are involved in both the return to school as biomedical, you know, professionals, but are involved in providing that advice on a consultancy basis. And I'm not talking about your typical consultant fee for service. I'm talking about for the public good, getting in there and doing it pro bono if necessary, but finding a person that's so expert at the physical plant aspects. And when I talk about physical plant, I think you guys understand as teachers, the hallways, the desks, the common spaces that Beth Ann was discussing, where students would have under normal circumstances been together in mass. What do you need to do to preclude, you know, the usage of those? The other aspects that you may have overlooked when I was hearing Karen speak about disinfection is that this is spread. Let me just be very frank here. This is spread nose to nose, mouth to mouth. It is not spread very easily, surface to mouth, etc. So her involving herself in disinfecting her desks and her books, you know, struggling to do that in 4 minutes between classes. No one has come up to her and recommended not to do that. If that is the case, that's a waste of effort where she could be focused on other things. That health and safety officer should be talking to the teachers so that they can remain focused on teaching. Making them part of a disinfection team is counterproductive and is just a recipe for failure. Okay, you have a teaching team and you have a health and safety leader and a leadership over disinfection. Okay, and I'm just speaking out loud based on everything I've read to get ready for this conversation. So, and Terry and John and Karen know that I'm the evidence-based guy. I'm the guy that, you know, looks at things and looks at that have worked in terms of their positive deviance and effectiveness, but also look at things that don't work and are useless. And it is also important to know what you are doing that is useless because you're wasting your energy on it. And other aspects of physical plant are important, like air conditioning. I don't know if you guys have air conditioning in your school. Do you?
So we have actually, go ahead, Karen.
Some of our schools, some.
Okay. What about you, Beth?
That's what I was going to say as well. In Wilkes-Barre and Crestwood, some of our buildings do and some of them don't. At Crestwood, we currently do have an EBSCO project that was going on pre-COVID, where all of our ventilation systems were being updated. They have assured us that they've been updated with, and I can't speak to the exact terms of it, but it's like hospital grade filters. So I have more information on that actually that I can share with you at a later date that maybe makes more sense.
Yes, so if you don't have submicron filters, then the air conditioning has to be shut off.
Right.
So that's one thing that your school district should be aware of. And this is going to be problematic once we go from warm weather to cold weather, because that includes your heating systems. The air that moves through has to actually move through your furnace and be burned. Otherwise, it is unsafe to recirculate. Because we're talking about, I mean, the numbers are scary. Karen said 1,800 kids, all moving about, all coming to school via different modes of transport. At first, I was like, oh, they're not coming to school via bus. That's good. And then she explains that they're coming to school via public transportation and or walking and or probably stopping off somewhere or walking with other people, other kids, likely unmasked. So the variability of these strategies, I mean, the strategies implemented are going to suffer from the variability of the children who have to flow through them. Okay, the variability of their, outside the school exposure.
Sanjay, I have two questions.
Sure.
So just because there's all kinds of viewers from over the country, just to give us reference.
Sure, great.
So for Scranton and then for Crestwood, what is the, sorry, my dog decides right now we have a dog issue.
We all do.
What is the test positive rate for I'm just curious what kind of level you guys are facing in those two counties. And then can you explain to me, so heaven forbid, if Karen, who sees how many students per day, if she, heaven forbid, comes down with COVID, and do 140 students need to quarantine for so many days because she had contact with them? And then I'm not sure, Beth Ann, if she teaches in pods, that situation might be different.
Excellent question. I'm going to let Karen answer that and interject two questions along with it. One is, how many kids are in your classroom? And then how many kids are you responsible for, in adjunct to the question Karen posed to you? So if you test positive, how many kids does that mean could have been exposed?
Okay, so on hall duty, any kid who walks past me, I could be exposed to. I have 150 students, 30 students in 5 classes.
Okay.
If I have a duty, that'll be another 30 kids, so anywhere from 150 to 180. So that's that. Plus, I don't live in Lackawanna County. I live in Luzerne County, and my children go to Misericordia University and Wilkes-Barre Area School District. So now we're talking cross county. I know at one point in time, Luzerne County was worse than Lackawanna. I think we're about equal now as to COVID rates. As to what happens if I come down with COVID and all of my children, like students, come down, I don't know. We don't know that yet. But I know that there's a committee who has a lot of smart people on it, and I'm sure that somebody's thought about that, and they'll let us know next week.
Well, don't be so sure. And then ask that committee to select the health and safety officer, because there needs to be one neck to wring, as we used to call it in health and safety in hospitals. There has to be one leadership, one neck to wring. Okay, one person to credit for success and one person to deal with failures. And that generally isn't a committee. And I can't stress this enough because I come from a background, I was trained at Geisinger, Danville by Al Bothy and, Dr. Ron Paulus and all of these luminaries from University of Chicago, Dr. Glenn Steele. I was part of Healthcare Innovations, Clinical Innovation Group. I did my fellowship in population health and analytics. So I know how structures, effective structures work when it comes to health and safety. So what I was talking to John about before we started here is that all of the AAP recommendations, CDC recommendations, are assuming that any child and any teacher on day one is carrying the virus. Okay? It's not like the school is a protected environment with zero COVID exposure on day one. We don't know that it is, and it's most likely that it's not because we don't have the testing, the adequate testing to ensure that, okay? How do you test all of your teachers and all of your students, 3 or 4 days before school and make sure that the test results all come back and they're all negative? You can't. It can't be done. At least here in the United States, we are not starting our schools with that expectation. If we did, then all of your strategies would be far more effective. But we don't have that. We don't have that scenario here. Okay, so again, I'm providing advice when I shouldn't be, but I just feel the need to do so because ultimately this needs to be something that you embed in your strategies as these plans evolve and get finalized. Where was I, John? Beth, you're breaking up.
Jump in really quickly. Oops, sorry. Sorry.
Okay, start over.
1 second. I'm going to turn my camera up because sometimes that helps when I just wanted to say that I appreciate, as a person who is can you hear me? Or
yes.
Am I still breaking out? As a person who is sitting on these committees, the reopening plan committee and health and safety committees, we do have a health and safety officer appointed. However, they carry multiple roles. So I'm going to take that information back to my team and really share that, because when you have a person who is trying to juggle all of these hats, this is too important to juggle. It needs to be the full focus, and I appreciate that advice. I really do. To some of what we were talking about with to Karen's point of how many kids she's exposed to, these are things that the committees are talking about, and we're trying to limit that by actually changing entire school days and not having, the kids move around the building. So keeping cohorts of kids together and having the teachers actually move instead of the children, and building it so just having one teacher be responsible for a certain amount of students at a time and keeping those students together as for contact tracing purposes. We're really kind of building the entire thing from scratch all over again. Schedules, the typical day that Karen may be envisioning, hopefully her team is going to be just reimagining that entire day and what that looks like to limit the exposure that she has to students. And to your point with, not knowing who's coming in and asymptomatic spread and things like that, it's very concerning.
Sure. I think that the other thing that we had talked about in past weeks that I'm glad Beth is here from a school psychologist standpoint, we have already seen cases of teachers and students dying because of this disease in different schools. And so I think the question that came up last week that prompted us to ask you both to join us was, are schools ready? And this is going to get real dark real quick, so just a warning. If 1% of if the disease has 1% mortality rate, which means 1% of people are going to die. And there are 1,200 students in Karen's building, then 1% is what, 12? 12 students are going to die from this in one high school, if it's at capacity. So say online, homeschool, cyber schools takes that down to 600, takes it down to half. So now 6 students are going to die. So that, that's 1 student in each grade from 7 to 12. And then those students are going to take that home to their family, are going to take that home to, other people. And so, there's a real psychological, sociological, mental health issue here. When Mrs. Smith passes away, now they're dealing with the death of a teacher. A fellow student passes away, or worse, a fellow student, worse psychologically, I think. A student goes home, recovers, but then grandma who lives with her has died, and then there's that, you brought this home, you gave this to grandma, you're why they died. And, I think when I was in high school, over 4 years of high school, maybe 2 students had died through the entire 4 years, right? So I know the names of the people who died, and I remember learning that they died, and I remember going to school and being in those places, and that's 20 plus years ago.
Yeah.
So I'm just wondering, how do educators, how do education support staff like that, or teachers like Karen, or school psychologists or guidance counselors and or other teachers prepare for that scenario? Because it's going to happen. We have to be realistic, and how do we get there? And silence.
Well, because that's like a yes/no question, John. That's a thinker. But if I think back, how did we handle Columbine? How did we handle 9/11? How did we handle rampant TB? How did we handle bomb threats? How did we handle guns in the school and gangs in the school? You know how you eat an elephant, John Daw? One bite at a time.
Yeah.
And that's literally the mindset. When I go into my building, I have to put out one fire at a time. I can deal with one thing at a time. I can handle one thing at a time. I can take it one step at a time. So how do I deal with it? Okay, here's what I'm going to do right now. And then I'm going to do the next right thing. And then I'm going to do the next right thing. We're going to do the best we can. And I hope that our plan encompasses all of that.
Yeah. So I want to answer Karen's question, Karen from Wisconsin's question about percent positivity. Here in Luzerne County, we're at 2.7% positivity. We have pretty much tamped this thing down. We have, we haven't seen a slowly rising positivity number in weeks. We have a few blips here and there, like 7 cases or 12 cases that are kind of surprisingly found, maybe once a week or once every 2 weeks. And then we just don't have a continuous rise anymore, as we saw in March or in April. We were hard hit in this county. As far as all the counties in Pennsylvania, we were one of the hardest hit. And again, it was driven mostly by one locality, which was Hazleton. We didn't see the same kinds of positivity rates in Scranton, which is a major urban center for for our Northeastern Pennsylvania region, Scranton and Wilkes-Barre are the major urban centers of Northeastern PA. Hazleton is less so, but we had most of our cases in that locality, and mostly because of transit back and forth, as I mentioned, between the northern New Jersey, New York metropolitan area. Okay, that being said, the percent positivity is around 2.7%. CDC and EU recommendations are that as long as your percent positivity in your locality, whatever that is defined as, I define it as a 25-mile radius, is less than 5%, then there is a certain level of safety in school reopening. So I believe both Luzerne and Lackawanna County, which comprise of most of Northeastern Pennsylvania, population-wise and also area-wise, have a percent positivity well below 5% right now. If it approaches 5, or if it crosses 9, and Karen, you mentioned you're in an area that's getting close to 9 in Wisconsin, then there's a much greater reason for concern and a higher risk level for schools to be open, to reopen and remain open. So this brings me back to the question ultimately, and Beth Ann and Karen Padden can perhaps answer. Do your districts, or do you have in mind a number or a trigger point? So I assume that you guys are going to be teaching a live classroom on day 1. That is the strategy right now going forward. You'll be opening school to live classroom teaching on day 1. What are the triggers that will change that to hybrid or halving your class size? And what would change that to a completely virtual class size? Do you know yet? I think Beth Ann said she doesn't know yet, or she, okay. What do you think, Karen? Go ahead.
The way it's been explained to me in the past is with the phases. Now that we're in a green phase, we are at a level of ability to be able to go back into the classroom depending on the students' choices. Like our students and parents do have a choice. They can go to our cyber program if they choose, or they can go to the brick and mortar school. But once we hit the levels that would put us back into the yellow or the red phase, that's when we're going to start seeing movements closer to full digital classroom. That's what I was led to believe with, while we're green, we're going to be okay. But as soon as it starts creeping back into the yellow and the red, get ready to stay home.
Got it. Okay, understood. That makes sense.
That was the case for us as well, except for there is a lot of local control. Am I breaking up again?
No, you're good. Okay, it's okay.
Okay, that would be the case for us as too. We would be following the phases, but there is a lot of local control given as well, and so I do foresee the possibility of, a superintendent in our area making that choice or that decision on their own, depending on, if there was a case or, God forbid, a death or something in their school. There is flexibility there for the superintendents to also make decisions, and I can foresee that happening before there's actually a leveled color phase move. And, just a stark reality of my job and my position, we are, as part of this, developing policies and procedures for the loss of a student or staff member. It's something that wasn't in place prior, and that is something that we are also in the process of developing.
Yeah, I think that's what John was getting at with his question. It is a trauma to lose either a classmate or a teacher in the midst of a school year, and how there is no standard way to offer everyone as a pamphlet or a brochure for everybody across the state or the country. Do A, B, C, and D when this happens to your school. There's no way. So there should be some localized approach that is thoughtful and based on what is going to be the best for your students and for your community. But John's right. I don't want to say it's inevitable, but it is imminent that these school districts, not just yours, but across the country, and I have our friend Brian Akers said that in Ohio is at 6.5% positivity in his area. Okay, so if you were to ask me, the schools do not open on day one until that drops below 5. Because the likelihood of losing someone in that scenario is much higher. It goes even higher if your percent positivity in your area is above 9, in which case, again, like Karen Padden said, that would be the green, yellow, red scenario. So under 5, green, 5 to 9, yellow, and then above 9, red. And I think that makes a lot of sense. And I think that should be adopted statewide. I think it is being adopted statewide, as Karen mentioned. It should also probably be nationally mandated, but that's a different story altogether. I do want to catch up on a few things because these are tidbits that we've kind of dropped along the way. And then I'll get back to the emotional aspects of this for kids and teachers. Face shields versus masks in a education environment. Clearly, for children who have special learning requirements, as Beth Ann described, and a mask precludes those from occurring, a face shield can be utilized, but then you have to understand that the distance requirement between that student, other students, and their teacher must be 6 feet or greater. A face mask cannot be used alone. A face mask in a healthcare environment and in most environments where its intended use is to prevent a splash, okay? So if you are in an ER and you're dealing with a large quantity of blood from a trauma, you put a face mask on so that that blood, which could be contaminated by virus or whatever, doesn't fall into your eyes, nose, or mouth. The mask only covers the nose or mouth in in an ER environment, in a cleaning environment. The mask only covers that. So there's still the threat of any infectious agent entering through the eyes. That's why a face shield is used. And it is often when we're working over a patient, we'll actually flip the face mask around and have it face upwards. Okay, so it won't be this way. It will actually be this way, so that when we're working on the patient, the splash doesn't come upwards into our face, nose, and mouth. There are studies, and they indicated in the chat as well, showing that waiters that have been using face masks alone in Europe have been contracting COVID, whereas those just wearing face shields alone without the face mask have been contracting COVID. And we got this question last week, if you guys remember, Terry and John, about face shields being solely effective. They are not solely effective. Their primary intended use is to prevent splash of large or small droplets onto the face from a potentially contaminated either inanimate object or other person. Okay, so in a healthcare environment, I believe it was brought up by Karen. We have too many Karens on right now. Karen from Wisconsin, that it has been used successfully in learning environments to have the children avoid touching their face too much. So they, instead of going for their mask and adjusting it, the mask kind of stays somewhat cleaner if there's a face shield over it and the kids are just adjusting their face shield instead of constantly going after their face. I don't know how accurate that description is of the utility of face shields in children. Okay, all of that being said, the preference is when you are precluded from being more than 6 feet apart from another person whose COVID status is unknown, the mask over your nose and mouth is the preferred method for protection. It has been said that using the mask in public, like going to your grocery store, it has been said by me, by the way, and many others, that going to the grocery store, big box stores, or other places with high human traffic, the mask is also assisting in the not spreading the virus from asymptomatic carriers. So it's not just for yourself to protect your nose and mouth, you're actually protecting others when you're wearing it. This is true in the school environment as well, but the children are going to assume that the mask is to protect them. So there needs to be a certain level of education about how at the level of fourth grade understanding or second grade understanding for second graders, or, you know, what I'm saying is the students, based on their level of capability to understand, need to be educated on day one. We're in school in a pandemic, and we have to make some adjustments. So what are the plans around that? Have you heard anything yet, teachers?
So exactly what you said is exactly what we've been advised. We are consulting with staff from Geisinger as well, with the entire county is coming in to meet with our administration. I met with them last week. Her name is escaping me, but she sort of just described everything we're doing as layers of Swiss cheese. It was her. So it was like, you know, everything you're doing has a hole in it, but the more layers that we can place on top of that, the more protection you're going to have. And so she was really advising us, and that same advice that you're giving is the same advice that she gave to all of the administrators in Luzerne County. And that's what we are now adopting into our health and safety plan. So, you know, shields are going to be available for, you know, lower incident populations that children with sensory needs, children with speech and language needs, when they're able to be safely distanced, but otherwise masks are required.
Well, we haven't been given an official opening of school directive yet. I can tell you our graduation ceremony is next week. We have 450 seniors who are graduating at the stadium next week. Each senior is allowed to bring 2 people. Teachers are, of course, going to be there, and they are insisting on social distancing, and they are insisting on masks. So based on that, my assumption is that they do understand the importance of those things. I hope in the future, I hope in our opening plan that we do consider social distancing and masks. However, I am planning for the kid who has nothing, because we have a very high poverty rate in our district, and we have a very high amount of children who don't speak English. So I'm planning for the kids who don't have a mask, who don't have a face shield, who don't have clean clothes, who don't have a home. You know, I had homeless kids last year, so I'm planning for them. And I have a stash of masks, I have a stash of fabrics, and I'm going to have a lot of spares for the kids who, even though we're going to tell them, you've got to come with a mask, they're going to come without a mask, and I'm going to be prepared to give them one. So I'm sure we're going to have things in effect, but I'm planning for the worst case scenarios of the children coming into my classroom.
Wow. Okay. All
Okay,
right.
did you see the question about how many times should a cloth mask be switched out during a 7 to 8 hour day?
7 to 8 hours. So, ideally, you know, you should have two cloth masks per day. So you should never use a cloth mask for more than 4 hours, just because it saturates easily with your own, water vapor that comes out of your nose and mouth, expectorant. And so it may just get uncomfortable. It may get kind of, soggy after a while. It all depends. If, you have a couple, it's 2 layers or 3 layers. We're looking at effectiveness. That's one thing. Effectiveness will be maintained for I would say at least 6 to 8 hours of usage, as long as you take breaks in between. But as far as comfort, you might want a dry one after a while. So if it all depends on your own level of comfort. That's a good question. As far as if that's a cloth mask, surgical masks are probably more ideal for children, because you'll never really know the condition of a cloth mask's level of cleanliness in the hands of a kid. So it would be my preference that the school districts provide masks to the kids. I mean, if we leave it to the kids and their parents, you'll have what Karen just described. You'll have disparity even at that problem, at the level of a mask. Okay. Whereas if you have, a standardized blue surgical mask, which you've seen me and John, demonstrate how to use and put on ourselves, and it's on our resource page. If you buy, 100,000 of those, I would hope the school districts had the money and capacity to do that. Then the child can use 2 or 3 a day and be okay, as long as they feel comfortable and it's available.
So that's my school board director hat coming on now, as far as the financial impact of COVID on our districts.
Mm-hmm.
You have about 40 face masks, or about 50 face masks for about $40 a mask, surgical. So they're about like $1 a piece is the pricing that we've been getting.
No,
so better price for you? No, what would you say is average if we bought in bulk?
37 cents. Definitely 37 cents.
Okay. Maybe you can text me your supplier.
You're based out of Texas. I send everybody to.
Okay, yeah, let us know. That would be really helpful, because what we were getting was, if we were averaging just under $1 a mask at 8,000 students at 2 masks per day, 180 days, we can afford it.
Yeah. Okay. All right. We'll see what we can do. We're on it. Hey, Terry, where you at? Montedoshi Industries got to jump on this immediately. So he's down in Texas anyway. He can go negotiate in person.
Yeah.
No, I think that there's definitely, I want there to be high availability of masks for teachers and students. I know there is a financial, major financial obstacle, but we'll see what we can do. Okay, now I have a scenario to read to you guys, and then we'll. Okay, Karen Padden, is it possible in your classroom with 30 students in it to have the desks at least 3 to 6 feet apart?
With 30 students?
Yeah.
No.
Okay, so 15?
Yeah.
Okay, but how do you then cycle 30 students through the classroom? Are you planning to split the class time in half, or the double the, like, what's the strategy here?
Well, I know that another school district that is close to us is planning on doing 2 days of instruction, a day of cleaning, and then 2 more days of instruction. That's what their plan is, and to give the parents a choice to go completely cyber. So, and the cyber choice will be aligned with the curriculum, and then the children can move in and out of the classroom so that if they aren't performing well on cyber, they could go back into the classroom. But that's their plan, is like a Monday, Tuesday, nobody's in school on Wednesday, and then another group of kids, like the first 15 kids are Monday, Tuesday. Wednesday we're off. Well, not off, we're home. And then Thursday and Friday is the second cohort. So they'll be splitting them into cohorts. But if that's our plan, great. But I don't know if that's our plan yet.
All right, what about, that addresses 2 questions. Desk separation, when they're present, fewer students in the classroom at once. What about lunch?
I don't know, because 500 children fit in lunch. We have 3 lunches.
How about you, Beth Ann? Lunch?
Lunch?
Lunch, we're going to be eating in our classroom, lunch and breakfast. So we're not going to be using our cafeteria space at all. And if at all possible, we're going to be using outdoor space when possible. So we're also building in for that social emotional component, 15-minute breaks, you know, I don't know per period, but per day down into time period schedule to provide for more recess time, more breaks, to allow the kids to unmask if possible, and also get that social interaction. But there's not going to be cafeteria use this year.
Got it. Okay, so what I did was I went through your the reason you Karen and Beth, we have now successfully completed the American Association of Pediatrics checklist based on every question that you answered. Cleaning and disinfecting high-touch surfaces, making sure students have the ability to wash hands, desks 3 to 6 feet apart, fewer students and staff in classrooms at any given time. Teachers move from classroom to classroom, not students. Lunches at their desks, not in common spaces. Using outdoor spaces as much as possible. Masking for all adults and the older students as much as possible, or I think what they mean by this is age 10 and above. And then Karen Padden, you described the flexibility to go virtual for those who choose to. So, okay, we're doing okay up here in Northeastern PA. All right, John.
Hello.
Yes, so I'm going to read you a bit of a paper, a summary that was sent to me via Facebook. The source is a CDC publication from Stein and Zamir et al., published in May. A large COVID, no, it was published just recently, published this month from study done in May. A large COVID outbreak in a high school 10 days after the school reopened. Are you, Beth or Karen, familiar with this?
Where's the location?
Israel.
Madrid.
Israel. Okay, here we go. March 13th, the schools all closed in Israel. March 3rd, kindergarten reopened, and grades 1 through 3, grades 1 through 3 and 11, and so all grades 1 through 12 opened on May 17th. May 19th through the 21st, there was an extreme heat wave, and because of the heat wave, face masks were waived. I believe that air conditioning was in all schools. Okay, so that was a factor. First major outbreak was detected on the May 27th, 8 days after the school opened. So there were 2 index cases. On May 28th, the school was closed. May 28th through 30th, everybody at the school was tested. Now, this brings me to the question about your testing strategy and capacity. So imagine school opens on May 17th. School closes on May 28th because of an outbreak. Okay. School, everyone in the school is tested by May 30th. And by early June, so that means like the first week of June, 87 contacts outside of the school were positive. Siblings, friends, teammates, students, and parents. So by June 30th, it was assessed that the school had been open for less than 11 days, so 10 days of opening. By June 30th, all test results showed that 65% of students 65% of students, 64% of staff had fully recovered, okay? The attack rate was 13.2% of all students contracted it, and 16.6% of all staff contracted it. Grades 7 through 9 had the highest transmission, and the highest attack rate was in the 9th grade, 20 cases in one class of 30. The second highest was 7th grade, 14 cases in one class of 30. Third and fourth highest were also another group of 9th graders where they had 13 in a class of 30 were infected. So the authors of the of this report said that the 3 C's were involved: closed spaces with poor ventilation and or air conditioning as the only ventilation; crowded spaces, which means Israel's classrooms were 30 up above 30. So 30 was the base class size, and some classes were 35 to 38. Okay, and then close contact settings where students were allowed to mingle freely. Okay, so any of these 3 C's could have been the cause of the high transmission rate. Closed spaces with poor ventilation and or air conditioning; crowded spaces, which means classrooms with greater 30 or greater students; and then close contact settings such as cafeterias, common spaces, etc., where students were mixing and many of them were not adhering to face mask usage during that time because they weren't in classrooms and it wasn't being enforced. Your thoughts?
That's an absolute possibility. All that could happen. And we could say you have to wear a mask, and we could say we're going to shut down the classes to a certain number, but not all classes can go down to 15. We have classes that are large, like art classes and chorus classes and band classes. We have huge common areas where students are coming in and out. Because the students take the bus, they get dropped off anywhere from 7 a.m. and then they don't go home until 4 or 5 o'clock. Yeah. So any and all of that, we could plan our faces off. We could have the best plan ever, but all of that still pertains. And it's not just my school, it's all schools too. So yeah, we could be prepared for the best and then it could all go awry.
Yeah, but you have a contingency plan now. Testing. Tell me about your testing strategy. And also, Beth Ann, your thoughts.
Yeah, I agree. I just think that if we're not able, this isn't just smoke and mirrors. This isn't just putting a plan down on paper and saying like, yes, this is what we're doing because we know what the guidelines are. We're really good at filling in the blanks. It's irresponsible to open if we're not able to do the things that we're saying that we're going to do. And if, to Karen's point, even in the best laid plans, we can still be facing, kids are kids, and some kids don't, like to have things on their bodies and will, by nature take it off and fiddle, and, we can't plan for everything. But I just think that's where the leadership comes in, and we have to be leaders in this and kind of take politics out of the scenario. And if it's not safe, and I don't know what is safe in the reopening of schools and, putting all of the kids back together, because I don't really even like that term, to be able to say, yes, we're going to be safe. I don't think it's something that I'd want to attach my name to. But we need to be responsible and honest. And if we're not able to follow the guidelines that we're setting forth, then we shouldn't move forward. And we need to be strong enough and brave enough to take the heat if that's the case. That's a ton of kids in a classroom. I hope that none of our schools right now, none of the schools that I've been in have been 30 to 38 children. So I hope that that's not the case anywhere here in Northeast PA right now, even pre-COVID, but I don't think that's a good learning environment in general. Pandemic or no pandemic. Testing, I think, is a huge problem, and I think that that's our biggest hole in all of this. I don't think that, we have kids that we can't, force to get tested or get immunized. I think we're going to run into that issue with teachers as well and staff members as well. I think that we can probably put policies in place and do have policies in place if there is a symptomatic. I worry about what we do with kids. Kids are going to get fevers. In September, you're going to have a child in your classroom that's going to have a fever, whether that's COVID-related, flu-related, or an ear infection. Yeah. So how do we force that family that who doesn't take their child for fillings or doesn't have the access to medical treatment? We have issues with chronic lice in our buildings and we can't get those treated. I mean, there's a component, a social, emotional, and socioeconomic component to this where we already struggle for some of our families to get the level of care that we feel is needed as far as medical and dental. And so throwing this on top of it, I don't know that we can ensure that someone even goes and gets tested if they're symptomatic. And then what do we do? Can't deny an education. If the child's special education, we can't deny an education to that student. So do we put our staff at risk because that student hasn't been tested because we can't deny services? So when you really get into the nitty gritty and the specific scenarios that can and most likely will arise, it's overwhelming. So I kind of like what Karen said is biting off, how do you eat an elephant? These are the things that keep me up at night. And I don't know that there's an answer, and I really am concerned about our ability to require testing for our students and our staff, because I don't think that we will be able to.
How did you get, okay, first of all, that was beautifully answered. You covered all of the major issues that you're facing. You really elucidated your challenges for us, and I appreciate it very much. How did you get Geisinger to help? Did they offer? Did you have someone, within your administration avail of a service from them? How did it eventuate?
So that came from the Luzerne Intermediate Unit. So LIU 18 had reached out to Geisinger as an organization and brought them in. So as a county, we meet regularly as administrators, and we'll often have people come in for various reasons to, and we typically like to be a united front. So even though it's local decisions and we are different as districts, we do try to kind of make similar decisions when at all possible, and you'll see that in our snow days. People who call off for the threat of snow, we kind of try to roll together. So the IU facilitated that partnership. And then on our personal pandemic committee, as I said, we have actually an epidemiologist and 2 pediatricians from the counties that are working with us and kind of guiding us through, because I didn't realize there were so many people giving that. I mean, there's so many organizations. It's like, who do you follow? Do you follow the the Pediatric Association, the CDC? There's guidelines coming from a lot of places, even locally. So kind of being able to see through that, it's really helpful to have medical professionals guiding us, because that's not what our expertise is. So I've been very appreciative of all the advice and consultation that we've had.
I have to say I'm very surprised. I'm surprised pleasantly, and I'm impressed that your school district has undertaken all of these things and brought in the words of experts and the opinion and strategies of experts to assist you. I wish there was a Geisinger down the block from every school, or in every school district there was someone at the level of a Geisinger, health and safety officer to assist. The Janet Weiss Pediatric Hospital in Danville, the extraordinary work Geisinger has done in pediatrics in the area, in central PA as well. So I'm just proud. And I'm also saying that because I was trained there. So I'm very happy and proud of you guys. I'm proud of Geisinger. I'm proud of Pennsylvania. And I just hope that this conversation helps other people throughout the country, because what you guys are thinking about and what you guys are doing, I think I'm also seeing a discrepancy, whether it's valid to assume this or not. There's a discrepancy between Karen Padden's experience up in Scranton and the social determinants of health that she deals with in Scranton, and the ones that you're dealing with there in the Crestwood district, Beth Ann. which is definitely socioeconomically different, very different from what she is facing in Scranton. Is that true? Do you feel that what I'm noticing is somewhat accurate?
Yes, it's very true. And I don't make policy. I just know what I can do in my classroom. And I know who in my department has diabetes, and I know who in my department has other immune diseases, so we worry about them too. If we have a problem, we're going to have to go get ourselves tested, and I have a feeling that the children will have to go get themselves tested, because our district, for as much as I love my job, my job, but our district is financially strapped. So since we're already in a budget deficit, I don't know how they're going to come up with money to pay for PPE for children, to pay for testing for children. I don't know how they're going to do it when when the funds aren't there. So yeah, it's a huge catch-22. I don't know how we're going to pay for it, and I don't know how we're going to go deal with it if we don't get it. So I'm just kind of assuming that if something happens, I'm going to have to take care of it myself. I bought my own paper. I bought my own hand sanitizer. Today at Target, I bought desk disinfectants, and I'm going to have to bring in a big bag of stuff. And my friends will do it too, because there is, when we have kids, our kids get free lunch. Our entire school district gets free lunch. So when we're not asking the kids to pay for their lunch. So if they forget their masks, I don't know how they're going to get another mask unless I'm there to do it. So yeah, there is a big a financial discrepancy and the socioeconomic discrepancy. There's a lot of diversity, and it's just a part of the big puzzle that I don't know how this is going to get solved until we have a plan, until we actually step foot. And I think we're going to have a plan A and a plan B and a plan C. We're just going to be really flexible.
Excellent.
I think a lot of it is there's a communication breakdown between the people who are planning and then the people who actually have to implement the plan. And I think that is sort of what you're seeing here between, in addition to the socioeconomic, Crestwood doesn't have a fund balance. So as a district, financially, we're in a similar situation as many of the school districts are in Pennsylvania. Our population, our community is socioeconomically more advantaged than Crestwood or Wilkes-Barre, where I'm also affiliated. So the challenges are definitely different. Based on that, districts were awarded certain CARES money to purchase PPE. I know Crestwood got just a little over $200,000. Wilkes-Barre was awarded a little over $2 million. Based on the differences in population there. However, our plans have backup plans, and our backup plans have backup plans, and all of that does cost money. And if we're going to be shifting between the strategies,
Yeah.
Maybe switching between platforms, it'll get expensive.
Absolutely. John, let's get Karen and Terry back in for the last 15 minutes here.
I do have a question, Sanjay.
Yeah, come on, video.
For both of the ladies. It has to do with in-between periods. And let me start my video here.
Yeah, please.
Okay, in between periods, you're talking about the size of the classes, and I'm assuming that they're all transiting around the hallways at the same time in between classes. I'm curious as to the number of kids that are going to be in those hallways, and how much are they going to have to travel between rooms? And I think that's going to drive the exposure to this thing. That's going to be the biggest hole in all of the plans. I mean, if there was one way to keep the kids in a classroom and have the teachers move, that would be ideal. But I see the hallways being a gigantic gaping hole in any plan that you come up with.
I totally agree with Terry. The thing that I fear is that, and we talked about this last week or the week before when we first started to focus on schools, is that kids have a tendency to behave in front of teachers. They'll wear the mask during the time they're sitting in a classroom, but even I get sick of wearing a mask for 45-minute stretch, you know, and you just need a break. That break is going to come, as Terry mentioned, when they go out in the hallway and all of them bring their masks down between classes, completely defeating the purpose of the mask usage during.
At the worst possible time, when they're all in the hallway together, is when the mask is going to come down and they're going to chat or kiss their girlfriend or, you know, sneeze on each other.
Yeah. What do you think, Karen? What are we going to do there? I mean, is that the scenario in your school? You're going to have transiting kids?
Well, so if you think 1,800 kids, we have 3 floors.
Okay.
But let's just pretend that we've cut down to half. So that's 900 kids, 3 floors. So what? 300 kids a floor?
Yeah.
Wait. Yeah. In between classes, and they have 4 minutes to get where they need to go. What do you think is going to happen?
Yeah.
Everybody's going to walk on their side of the building. Now, elementary, I could totally see people staying in a room and the teachers moving. I could absolutely see that, but I can't speak to elementary because I work in the high school. I only know what I know in my classroom, and that is the teachers don't move, the kids do.
Yeah,
because they've got all those classes.
We believe the risks are lower in elementary age group, and the risk is higher in high school.
Mm-hmm.
And we have a friend on Facebook, and who's been watching a friend on our resource page who's a pediatrician. I think his name is Dr. Marchbank, and he's been looking at the evidence that we've been collecting and basically corroborating it with his own experience. That respiratory function at the age of 10 and above is equivalent in terms of surface area and other to most adults. You know, 10 to 12-year-olds being the size of a small woman, and you know, at the age of 18, or I'm sorry, 14 or 15 and up, they're almost adult lung capacity. So if they were going to be walking around with masks off between classes, Terry has nailed the spot. The transmission is going to occur. It's not necessarily where then they're seated, even if they're 6 feet apart with masks on in the classroom. It's during the transit times. So transit times need to be addressed. The other thing is highly recommended by, I'm not sure that the CDC necessarily recommended this, but I'm seeing that it was recommended out of the EU and in Asia. My colleagues in Malaysia and India are because their class sizes are so huge, the only strategy they have is something called cohorting or pods. You have 10 maximum students that you interact with through the whole day. You can't eat with another pod. You can't hang out with another pod until that case positivity rate comes down to below, 2% or whatever. Then you can slowly start to increase your pod sizes. Is there any thought to doing that, either Beth or Karen?
We don't teach just one thing at one level. For example, for me, I teach freshman English, 1 class. I teach 2 classes of junior American literature, and I teach 2 classes of creative writing, which are a mix of 11 and 12. So I don't think the pod, I don't think the pod would work. In some districts, I'm sure it'll work beautiful. But for us, I don't think the pods are going to work unless they make massive changes in people's schedules. And the students chose their schedules in January. They meet with guidance and they have a list of things that they need to take in order to graduate according to the state of Pennsylvania. So the students already made their schedules, and the schedules were already done. Whether they change those, we'll see. And if they do, okay, we'll deal with it.
And those are things that we are considering as far as keeping kids together, but as Karen said, it's a similar situation. So it really is a matter of rearranging your staff, rearranging your schedules. It's going to be mass reorganization that needs to happen in terms of scheduling to make this, to make it work. But that's exactly the direction that we're moving. I know the state of Pennsylvania is making it, or is trying to make it, to pass through where previously you would need an emergency certification if you were just an English teacher to be able to then go ahead and teach math. You need to get emergency certified in that subject. So due to this current situation, they're trying to alleviate that process. So if we have teachers that are, you know, teaching gym or art or situations where we're not able to do that this year, that we won't have to go through an emergency certification process to allow them, you know, to redistribute their expertise to other areas. So if that goes through, that'll make our lives a little bit easier.
I feel like Karen Padden would make a hell of an AP calculus teacher. To that end, on curriculum, I think Beth, you might have been in one of my workshops. I used to teach all of the guidance counselors in the county and all of the English, or many of the English teachers in the county, signs to prevent bullying in our schools. And so my question slides to the idea of, do you see just on a creative level, Karen Padden, you teach creative writing. So, and we teach in teaching to see signs of bullying or abuse. We teach where that's going to come out is a sudden change in academic performance or tone in writing assignments. So my question, to shift it into the current cycle, is, are there curriculum ideas, curriculum changes? Do you think, you know, because this is a high stressor. I listened to a radio show today where they were saying, you know, everybody's on edge, everybody's, you know, stressed out to the max. And one of the ways that educators can open pathways to express that anxiety or to express that stress is by creative outlets. So we can't have chorus because we can't have close by singing. We probably can't have orchestra. We can't have necessarily art in the same format that we might. But do you see the other humanities like English and how we teach history, or the American literature examples that you might choose, Karen, for your classes? Do you see those being a shift in ways to help teach life lessons and coping skills and all that? And do you see that as a necessary shift that our teachers and our educators have to make these days?
100%, because when you're teaching something, when you have a curriculum, when you write the curriculum and it aligns in a certain way, yes, I know that I have to teach sinners in the hands of an angry God. I know I have to teach that, but how I teach that and it being up to me is where the magic comes in. So I can not only make it a lesson in literature, a lesson in oratory, a lesson in public speaking, but I could also make it a lesson in patience and in kindness and in understanding. So you're not just teaching grammar and pronouns and antonyms anymore. You're teaching, this is how you give warm and cool feedback, so that you give the best kind of feedback and that you're not just excluding somebody. And this is how you put people in a group so that they work together and listen and make friends for the first time. This is how you would create a class where it's the only class that the kid feels safe in all day. Like, so it's not just processing a book anymore. It is absolutely 100%. You have a live human being in front of you, and you don't just have to connect with them here. You have to connect with them here. You get them here first, then you'll get them here. So everything that we're talking about is important, because you're not just worried about the kids and catching something or giving something to their family, but what else are they going through? When I had a student in the spring whose brother brought COVID home because he worked in a food store, and the brother gave it to everyone in the household. I had to not just handle that academically, I also had to handle it, you know, emotionally too. Like, is she okay? Is he okay? Is the family going to be okay? How is this going to affect everybody else? Are they going to bully her because now she doesn't have to do the work? Like, there's a lot of balls in the air that I've got to juggle. So yeah, John, we do have to worry about bullying. We do have to worry about things like, I have a whole list of things about equality, Black Lives Matter, LGBTQ. I have students of every make, model, and color, and I'm going to love them as much as I always have. And I have to worry about them getting sick with COVID. So it's a lot to think about, but it's not undoable. And just to comment that, I know we're talking a lot about kids getting back to school and kids getting back into brick and mortar, but I don't want people to think that we're not also advocating for a quality online portion, because done properly, learning online can be really, really dynamic and really effective, but you got to have the buy-in by the parent and the teacher and the administration and the faculty. So if you've got a kid who's like, yeah, I want to go cyber, great, go cyber. But then if the parent's like, that sucks, well, then it's kind of a word. But it can be. I've taught critic recovery courses in art and in PE. So it's been done and it can be done. We just have to not think of it as like a second cousin, like, oh, only in school is best. Well, yeah, in school is great, but we can do this online if you give us enough time to prepare, and if we put on our positive mindset hats. It can be done. It's not the greatest, but it's not the worst. The worst is nothing at all. And that's my soapbox.
I just want to add some thoughts to what John said about the experience of learning. The experience of going to school isn't all just about learning in subject matter. It's also, it's your life as a student. It's your, it's the things that you love, and sometimes it's the things that you are brought to hate, like being bullied or like not being included in whatever way. Focusing first on the things that you love, students are missing out or will miss out as we continue to deal with the pandemic on sports and music and things that are, I know that I was very, very close to my teammates when I played sports. I was very close to the kids I sang with in the madrigals. They became lifelong friends out of high school and grade school. I think part of the initial part of school, and I'm just offering this as advice, and I'd like to hear your feedback. The initial part of school has to be educating the kids about the changes in behavior required to deal with COVID and go back to school with good behaviors and successful behaviors that will lead to a sustained, safe school year. right? So that it becomes easier day by day and week by week to go to school in person, and then eventually regain the ability to enjoy those activities, sports and chorus and being together with other kids without a mask on, without the fear and without the other stuff. That's one thing. I think hearing what John said and also hearing what Karen said is, although I agree with the fact that you can provide a very, very effective online experience, I guess I still am an advocate for, and I still am hoping and pressing for kids to safely regain those positive experience of schooling. And I know that, and I've learned a lot from just this last 2 hours from Karen, especially about the challenges, especially if you are excluded from the very start from the perfect education or the perfect learning environment. And what I mean by that is you're excluded from the start if you're a student that has to go through all kinds of struggles just to get to school. If you are a student that has to go through all kinds of struggles just to afford a mask or masks necessary to utilize at school, or you're a student that's relying on Karen, Mrs. Padden, to provide pencils and paper and a mask and safety and, food and all of that just before, even before you get to open your notebook and learn in school. And then on top of that, I'm sorry I have to bring this up. I'm not sorry. I'm proud that I have to that I bring it up, and I'm angry that I have to. Exclusionary rhetoric, no matter where it comes from, that we saw this last week on continued hatred towards Dr. Rachel Levine, continued discrimination seen by the administration towards transgendered, and continued exclusionary rhetoric, exclusionary sentiment that is seeping, pervading our country and our society, that does affect children, that does, the child that is transgendered or is struggling with their identity, whatever that identity is not stepping into an inclusive environment. Maybe some schools do provide an inclusive environment. I would say that not all schools are those where children who are dealing with their own identity. I don't think all schools are exclusionary. I think sometimes kids go into a school and it is inclusive. They do have the inclusion, the feeling of inclusiveness from their friends there, and that they're missing out on that in this pandemic and in this scenario. So it's not always the negative. It is also the positive of the school environment. So you guys are heroes. Beth Ann and Karen, you're amazing. I'm very, very thankful that you joined us, and thankful to John for bringing you guys to us. John, I now hand over to you, Karen, and Terry to see if there's any questions that we have not gotten to on Facebook and or the Q&A panel. I also open the floor to Karen and Beth Ann for any of their final thoughts. John, take it away.
I would say when a certain consideration about the mask question that we talked about earlier, and the school providing masks, if it's, and I don't mean Mrs. Padden sewing masks, because I've seen her sew things. She can definitely sew things, but one of the challenges that we want to try to do, and we can have a hour-long discussion over dress codes and the benefits and disadvantages of dress codes or dress standards. But if cool guy over here comes in, we'll call him Logan, for example, comes in with a really cool, awesome Star Wars fancy schmancy mask, and then the scrappy kid, we'll call him Ian for some reason. These are Karen's children that are good friends. And he comes in and his mask is made from like the basic, you cut a sock in half and sew it. What kind of criticism are we setting up in an already stressful environment? So as you go and talk to your people about ordering masks, there's a mental health, emotional health angle that you can attack this by standard blue masks that blah blah blah. Okay. Yeah. Or just get Karen Padden like tremendous bolts of plain material and set her to work for the next month and a half.
Like she doesn't have enough work already, John. Okay.
I don't know. She's pretty amazing, and I've known her for a couple of years, and now you all know that. But anyway, Terry, Karen, any questions from Facebook?
I have some statements from Facebook, and one is someone relating to what they were told of what the teachers will be able to do in between each class. They will be able to clean all the desks and chairs, and other miracle thinkings that people have. And you know, once you start hearing something like that, there's a disconnect from reality. Yeah. There's not the time to do it. There's not the time to peek out the door to see what's going on in the hallway while you're scrubbing down a desk with Lysol. It doesn't work.
Right.
All right. So as soon as you hear that, it's a disconnect. Same with, like, you know, temperature taking. That's too late to you know, the horse is out of the barn. If they come in with a fever, they're sick, you know, and it's going to be
if the school actually has a policy or
right.
You know, that, like Beth Ann said there, she has taught knowing that there's a kid with fever in her classroom.
Yeah. And flu season starts the beginning of school. You have kids carrying allergies through the fall until the first frost. So I respect what you do, and I wish you a lot of luck. I see very bad times ahead.
That's why we keep Harry around, for his optimism.
Yeah, and a lot of times parents have to work, and they'll give their children Tylenol in the morning, you know, to get them to school so they're fever-free for the morning, and then you don't know that they're ill because, you know, parents are under a lot of pressure a lot of times they don't have the time off work to call off work, so the child has to go to school even though they know that they're symptomatic. So that's another concern that we have.
Yeah. You know, what hurts me is that scientifically and even strategically, hearing all of these concerns, I, in my head, have all the solutions, but we can't deploy them. They're either too expensive or they're not, you know what I mean? Like rapid testing at the door and a strategic testing strategy for all the teachers and all the kids and parents, and, you know, community-based surveillance and track and trace. Like, you know, give me a budget and let me have at it. But obviously, that's not going to happen. Karen, anything on your end? Questions on the Q&A? Or?
Yeah, I guess, you know, I can't just help relate it to what's going on here in Wisconsin, in that we're at a 9% test positive rate, and we're struggling with parents that have a lot of misinformation and are insisting that we do an open. So, I mean, that's personally where a lot of Wisconsin districts are right now, because we're trending up. But a lot of parents really do not believe that the virus is a risk. And I was thinking last night, because I went to an in-person meeting and we were in the auditorium, we were socially distanced, and there was a group of parents there advocating to open schools, even though we're going up. and a lot of the parents weren't wearing masks indoors. So it makes me think in my mind that they might send their kids to school because they really don't believe in the risk in the first place. So I feel like that's a different set of problems than a person that might send their child to school because they're desperate, they don't have any other options. We also now have this subset of people that don't believe it's real, and they're very vocal, I have to say. They show up and they're very vocal. So
Karen, since you mentioned that, and I'm in Texas. We've gotten a little bit of a plateau going. So our positivity rate has dropped down to 500 million, and we have parents groups marching to get their kids into school. They're demonstrating to get their kids into school. It's an insane. Maybe they have COVID and the brain injury has already started. I don't know, but it's happened. They're actually had demonstrations today to get the kids into school. It blows my mind.
Yeah, and I am seeing a lot of people kind of equate their schools with daycares.
Yep, there you go.
And the mission of schools is to educate, and I understand the way we have set ourselves up as society and the way we have prioritized things is that they basically, I see all of these societal failures shifting all the way down to our schools all of the time. Everything, there's bullying that shifts, people are shifting responsibility to schools. Now the virus is being shifted to schools. So it's a really difficult place to be in. And have you seen or struggled with disinformation from any or denial from parents? Is that happening? I'm assuming it's happening all over the US, but it's something that's happening a lot here.
Yeah, I'm getting head shaking from Karen and Beth, but we can't hear them.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
So this comes back to something I strongly believe in this. Look, when, my son is 12 years old and he is my health and safety officer. So like, Dad, are you wearing your seatbelt? Dad, don't go too fast. Dad, it's snowing, right? Somehow he has picked up, what are good behaviors, what is a safe driver, quote unquote, even though he and his RC cars indicate that I should be worried once he turns 16. But, I think kids we should try to, in the first week of school, give the kids a basic education on best practices, okay? And let them teach their families. Let them go back to their, and the younger you get them at, the more likely and more effective they're gonna be. Daddy, wear a mask. Daddy, why aren't you wearing it? You're going into the store, here's a mask. I'm hopeful that actually might move the needle a little bit, okay? So even if Sean Hannity and everybody else is screaming in Daddy's ear all day on the radio, at least someone in the back seat, with small feet can say, Daddy, wear the mask. Where's your mask? And so maybe the teachers can instill some of that in their students in the first. Anyway, we are over. John, you can take us out and then switch over to the open discussion, and our teaching friends are free to leave us because we've held them too long, or they can join us for the after session, which will prove to be very spirited today because I am on fire. So thank you again for joining us. John, take us out.
Thank you everybody for joining us tonight. We will, I guess, be back here next week for our episode number 20. and we'll see what the topic's going to be. We haven't gotten that far yet. I want to thank Karen Padden. I want to thank Beth and Owens-Harris for joining us tonight. On behalf of Terry, Karen, and Sanjay, my name's John Daw. We'll see you again soon.
Schools